Man Up, a program dedicated to inspiring and helping men live lives of heroic virtue. And now, it's time to man up.
Welcome to Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. We are broadcasting on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network. I am Joe Stopulus, and today it's part 2 of a recap of the first 300 episodes of the Man Up Show. Let's start in prayer in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and the snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. In the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. So last week, Genesis for the show was, if you heard last week's show, I was talking with Deacon Marr Campbell during one of our carathons. And, he was going to be interviewing me for a matter of, 5-10 minutes. And he said, hey, I think a fun thing to talk about would be kind of like where your show came from and all, kind of the genesis of it and some highlights of, maybe some favorite episodes or whatnot. And I thought it was interesting. And I realized that was right around like this time right now is essentially our 300th episode, plus or minus, there's some days that might have been missed in there, but it's close enough to hit a milestone like that and kind of think, okay, let's look back on it. Let's reflect on where we've come, where we're going. But mostly, I think, I mentioned this, I'll mention it again in this episode, which is to say, there's a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of good stuff in here. So if you're new to the show, and I say new in the last 3 years, the stuff we did those first 4 years, there's a lot of really good things in there. And there's some stuff that I think, as I mentioned now multiple times, these are timeless truths, right? So what the Catholic Church holds to are timeless truths. Are there things that are newer today? Yeah, right. So pornography is a thing that is newer today. And so we're tackling that issue. But it's obviously just as relevant today in 2023 as it was in 2016 when we did our first episode on it. And so, I look at the places that we're at today. I look at the interviews we had recently, and I also then reflect on where we've come from. And it's exciting. It's exciting to see a lot of the great people we've had on the show, a lot of the fruit that's been born of it, and in my own life too. So I might get into reflecting on my own life at the end of this next part, but because I've seen how much I've changed. When I look at some of these interviews I did, some of the awakenings I had in my own life. So hopefully through kind of going back down memory lane here, I can introduce you to maybe a show or two you can go back and listen to, get plugged in on, and then maybe have, reintroduce it to your life and maybe have it change you a little bit more like it did for me as well. So we're going to head to a short break and we'll be right back.
Thank you to our business partner, Matt Moffat, offering Fiber New Restoration Services. Eco-friendly and mobile, Matt can come to your home or business to repair, restore, and renew damaged leather, plastic, vinyl, fabric, and upholstery. Learn more at fibernew.com/Altoona-Des Moines.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by the Sarah Vocations Ministry. Sarah is an apostolate dedicated to the support of new and existing vocations to the priesthood and consecrated life. Learn more at joinsarah.org, joinserra.org.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by Bozen the Florist. Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, weddings, whatever the message, say more with Bozen. Bozen.com, 515-244-ROSE. Bozen makes the moment mean more.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio provided by Integrative Psychology Services, a private practice of Catholic therapists offering individual and family therapy for adults and adolescents. Learn more at intpsychology.com.
Lace up your running shoes and get ready to conquer a scenic trail-looped course surrounded by breathtaking natural beauty at the Pumpkin Spice and Everything Nice 5K run and charity walk, benefiting Mary's Helping Hands. 10 a.m. Saturday, November 18th at the Valley Community Center in West Des Moines. This event is not just about running, it's about making a positive impact in our community while enjoying a fun-filled day with family and friends. To register or learn more, visit maryshelpinghandsiowa.org.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio comes from Next Generation Realty, a Catholic and family-owned flat-fee brokerage serving Central Iowa since 1994. Next Generation Realty can handle every step of the process of buying or selling a home. Learn more at nextgenerationrealty.com. Iowa Catholic Radio would like to thank our business partner, Edible Arrangements, for their support, offering fruit bouquets and gourmet dip chocolate treats. On the go or have it delivered for that special occasion, ediblearrangements.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio provided by Paul Martin and Paul Mitchell, owners of Imogene Ingredients. Imogene Ingredients supply specialized feed ingredients for livestock and pet diets to improve maternal and young animal health in both conventional and organic production.
My help comes from you.
Welcome back to Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio, reflecting on the first 300 episodes of the Man Up Show. And if you listened last week, you may have recognized that I only made it to the end of 2017. So I promise you we're not going to go 3 episodes deep on this deal. But I do, at this point, Father Zach's still on the show. I mean, this is how long ago this was. This is 2018 now. And so I thought I got a lot that I still want to pull out of this. Some episodes I've highlighted that I thought were worth mentioning, worth kind of exploring. And so, again, I think that there's a lot of good that can come from thinking about these things, going back and I don't want to have these guys on and do the same interview again, but I do think it is worth going back and listening to some of these topics because there's just really good people. There's some really good interviews from some great holy men that I think we could all learn from. So the 2018, episode 75 was The Greatest Generation by Gary Dolphin. So had the opportunity to have Gary Dolphin on and to discuss. He actually did an homage to my grandfather. That was during, I think it was it was Veterans Day, I believe, and they did it at the game. They interviewed before the game and whatnot. My grandfather, on my dad's side, my paternal grandfather, flew over 30 missions in the European theater. And flew 2 missions on D-Day. Anyway, Gary Dolphin's a big history buff, and so we did an episode on the Greatest Generation, on the virtues that we can learn from those men. So that was a lot of fun. Had a 2-part episode later that year with Father Robert Spitzer. So for those of you who are not familiar, I strongly encourage you to read any of his stuff. But Father Robert Spitzer does a really good job of balancing out the idea of science and religion and how they fit together, and really dives deep into the science and talking about the language of God, how God speaks to us. And so, he would go over, I remember in these episodes, he just hit point after point after point of how much proof there is in the world for God's existence through science. And so that was a 2-part episode with Father Robert Spitzer. A couple episodes later, episode 86, we had Elvis Gerbach. Again, it was on faith in sports. Elvis Gerbach was a great NFL player, and he's now a deacon in the church. And so how did he balance this career in sports, in the limelight, his entire career, and then to get out of that? So how did he first balance his faith within the sports while he was in it? And then afterwards, how did he feel like that tug to the diaconate? And then we got to 2019, which was Father Zach's last show on episode 98. So we made about 100 episodes or so with Father Zach. And it was interesting because for me, as I mentioned last time, that it was having Father Zach, I couldn't have done this without him. And with all sincerity, there's no way I could have done this without him because I didn't have any theological chops. I was an insurance salesman that, was having a radio show. Like, what do I have to talk about? Right. And so that was always a big thing to me, is like, and he would always try to say, listen, there's, you're a blind beggar trying to show other blind beggars how to have food, right? Like there's a lot of good that you've had experienced within the Catholic Church, and you're going to bring stuff to light. And, so he kind of talked me through that. Well, so fast forward to 2019. And he ships off to the Air Force. And so now I'm kind of like, do I keep the show going or not? Well, I realized pretty quickly, if I'm going to do this, I've got to get really dialed in on the interviews. Meaning I've got to get a lot of them scheduled and maybe have a theme to it. And so that's where this idea of the great men of the Bible came from. So I've done, as you've heard, Jeff Cavins' Bible Timeline a couple times. It was an enormously influential thing for both Kristen and me when we first went through it. And so this idea of the great men of the Bible, I don't even know how it came to us. But I if you haven't done it yet, it's probably the thing I'm most proud of in the 7 years of the show, doing basically a Bible timeline through the eyes of these great men of the Bible. And I know I learned a ton from it. I had many people throughout throughout that year saying that they were utilizing it in their men's group as kind of their study material that they were going to talk about. So it really obviously great to hear that, but it was a labor of love, right? So there was a lot of work that went into it, but I've gone back through it a couple times now, and every time I listen to it, I'm like, oh man, I forgot about that, or help me to understand whatever the specific man was for that episode, get to know them better. So of all the things, I could encourage you to go back, and obviously there's a lot of episodes. It covered from 99 to 140. It wasn't all of those, but it was within that. We had a ton of them, and I felt really good about how they all turned out. In the middle of that, a couple of them was the Gulag Archipelago. So I'd read that year, and it was a pretty transformative book. I mean, Jordan Peterson had just released his new forwarded version of it, of Solzhenitsyn's work. And there's a guy by the name of Dr. Doug Kreese who has written on the book extensively, and I had him on to talk about the importance of that work of literature. And then episode 133, towards the end of that year, was Lessons from My Grandfather. This is one of those kind of raw ones for me where, my grandfather just passed, and I had time to reflect on the impact he made in my life. And this really, resonated with me from I've talked about this prior to that episode, but this idea of even when you're a grandfather, you still have a tremendous amount of influence on your grandchildren. And both of my grandfathers did. And that episode, obviously, I probably get choked up, I think, at the end of it. I was definitely emotional. But I was very blessed to have an incredible grandfather. And that was kind of an homage to him. But at the same time, helping us to realize that, our parenting's not done when we have grandkids, right? So we just get our kids out of the house. You're always parenting. And so that was a good reflection for me to remember, okay, what did my grandfather, what are the lessons that he imposed upon us? What were the examples that he led with, that we, my generation and myself, want to then pass on to our kids? 2019, the last episode of that year, is a two-parter with Joseph Pierce, who's a giant in the Catholic world, on literature every Catholic should know. I think it's the first time I had him on the show. I've had him on since then, but this is kind of like that Dr. Mitch Kalpazian, which I ended the last episode with, helping us to get into this idea of literature. And again, talking about how I have changed so much since the show started. Again, I never read books prior to 2015, really. At this point, I'm doing multiple episodes on how to explore great literature, how to get in. What are those starting books? What are we looking for when we're getting into reading? Because again, I do think as men, there's something much more laudable about reading a good book than there is about watching going to Netflix, right? I mean, I think when we compare those two things, one is clearly has more virtue in it than the other. And so Joseph Pierce, a couple episodes there of how can we get into this virtue building habit of becoming men who read. 2020 started off the year, episode 166, with my keynote address at the Iowa Catholic Men's Conference. Interesting thing, that took place in February of 2020. And it's just nuts because we had 700 guys. I don't know what the number was, something like that, in that Marriott downtown, or the Embassy Suites downtown. And it was full, packed house. It's packed house. Again, not because of me. It was Matt Campbell and the bishop. But that said, I got to deliver a talk. But again, reflecting on the fact that it was 1 month before COVID, and then everything went crazy right after that. So I look at the pictures from that. I'm like, man, that was just 1 month before COVID. And we were all smashed in there. And again, how I longed for that throughout COVID. But I was proud of that talk, in that it really did sum up my a lot of the things that I preach about small groups, about Catholic, about Christian friendships, about the importance of fatherhood, and tied it all together in a concise talk. It's something that I was definitely proud of that. Another one that was on a similar vein of that same year in 2020, obviously it was an election year, and episode 188 was Why I Can't Vote Pro-Choice. And I've never, I don't make a lot of political stands on this show. I try to kind of avoid that if possible. But I was so fired up about this issue as the left in the country has gone from, safe, legal, and rare to literally like being proud of their abortions and saying abortion's a positive good for society. I can't handle much more than that, right? And so in 2020, I made a fairly impassioned plea to my listeners about why I cannot vote pro-choice. And again, that was one that I spent a lot of time. I actually read the whole thing. I wrote a giant script out and read the whole thing. Hopefully it was more entertaining than that. Hopefully it was good to listen to, but that got shared a decent amount. And again, it was something that I'm proud of because it was a stand that I felt needed to be taken, especially at that time in 2020 when there's so much going on. There's still it's equally as much today, but something we as Christians just can't be wallowing around. We have to be able to stand firm on that. Episodes 194 and 5 were responding to God's call with Mark McGeary, his story into the priesthood, his discerning into religious life after married life, a really powerful testimony from him. And then 2021 starts his consecration to St. Joseph. This is when Father Don Calloway had really lit a fire with that book, and it was the year of St. Joseph, and it was just perfect. And to have Don Calloway on to start that year was just great. Another one from that year was Monsignor James Shea, From Christendom to Apostolic Mission. Still arguably one of the best books I've ever read. And you could probably read it in a sitting. It's about 100 pages. Monsignor James Shea, I'm encouraging you to go back and listen to a lot of these episodes. Hopefully some of them are sticking you out and you're like, gosh, that would be going to kind of revisit. This is one where that book I've reread multiple times now. It's just that good. And so this gives you a little bit of the vision into Monsignor's head and why they wrote the book and the fruit, also a lot of the fruit of the book that has come from it. But that book specifically has kind of been a paradigm shift for me in how I see the world today. This idea that we used to have a Christian culture and you could put your kids in, let's call it this river that goes downstream. And if you just be a part of that river, your kids will turn out Christian. Well, that no longer is the case. We don't live in a Christendom society anymore. It's much more like the early pre-370s where it's almost an illegal superstition. And we have to fight against the tide. As G.K. Chesterton said, only a dead thing can go with the water. Only an alive thing can swim against the current. And so Monsignor James Shea, in that book, he and the other people from University of Mary's killed it. So that was I love that interview. I was excited to have him on the show. Then I did a 5-part series that really started at episode 218 on the fulfillment of all desire. That's a book I've now read twice. And if you could read only one book on the spiritual life the rest of your life, that would probably be it by Ralph Martin. And it's just an incredible book. And enough that I spent 5 episodes diving through the writings of the great saints who essentially he compiled their writings together. But it is a tour de force, and it's basically to me the best book, the best explanation of how to grow in the spiritual life. Started the year of 2022 off on great marriages and had my wife on to talk about what she thinks makes a great marriage. And we talked kind of in tandem about marriage in general and what we think makes successful marriages from what we've seen and what we've experienced in our own marriage and how we've grown together. So again, that was kind of a raw one, and it was fun to have Kristen on the show for that. That was 238. 246 is Zach Sims, coworker, buddy of mine, The Power of the Gospel. The reason I love this show so much is just he's a random guy. Came in my office one day and says, hey, I think I got a good story for you. And it's one of those ones that can, I think really brings it down to just X's and O's, brass tacks of why we need to be people who tell other people about the gospel, because Zach's life was changed 180 degrees just by a friend, kind of, just constantly, but not overtly inviting him to the Lord. And it was a really cool story. Joseph Pierce on again for 251. The Lord of the Rings, had 2 episodes with him. I could nerd out in the Lord of the Rings for a long period of time. And that was a great one. Episode 256, 254, on War and Peace. So this literature idea has now come up multiple times. Before this show started in 2016, I was like totally addicted to sports, didn't read anything, on and on. And the fact that within, 6 years, I'm doing like breakdowns of War and Peace. I had a fun doing it. And I actually got a lot of good feedback on that episode. But B, it was it just shows you how much I changed in the 6 years and starting the show. And I mean, the show has maybe something to do with it. All these interviews I'm doing, and some of you can see in some of these interviews when I'm being changed. I talked about the cold showers and the Exodus 90 stuff, but then there's these slower ones, like how in the world from 6 years I go from not reading to diving into War and Peace, that and like doing shows on it is just crazy. 2022 episode 260, Dr. Steve Aviles, Science and Miraculous Healings. That is another one of those episodes where it's like, man, share that with anyone. And you're trying to talk about this, what happens at Prayer Fire Ministries, that God's really working in today's world, that the Holy Spirit's alive. That's about as much proof as you can have when you have an orthopedic surgeon who specializes in shoulders, whose shoulder was miraculously healed at a healing service. Episode 267, another one of these ones that changed me, like on the spot, the 28-day fast from Dominic Rivera. So, again, a change in what is possible. I had no idea you could do this. I didn't know people still did this. And to be there in person, meeting Dominic and talking through this with him was an incredible experience. And it opened my eyes to what's actually possible when it comes to fasting. Last episode of that year was Making an Impact, episode 270 with my brother, where we discussed our piano teacher and the impact he made in their lives. But then I think more broadly, what are the impacts that we're trying to make in other people's lives? What are those things that we can do to leave a mark on those people around us? And I think that's always a healthy thing for each of us to think about. And then in 2023, don't have much time left, but the Cardinal Virtues series this year, I had thought about that one a lot. I knew it was going to be a bunch of work to put it together, even though it was only 6 episodes, but finally got it off the ground. And that's, again, one of those things where I kind of just felt good about it. I really was excited about the guys who we got put together for that. And I was really, I learned a lot from it. I hope you did too. And that's one of those ones I know, similar to the Great Men of the Bible, where I know I'll be revisiting that one for years to come. So if you missed that, definitely go back and listen to that. 282, an eyewitness to Vatican II, Monsignor Larry Beeson. How blessed we are to have a guy, in Des Moines, who is on the ground of Vatican II, and to hear those stories. That's just one of those things. It's just an absolute treasure where you just don't get to have front row access to that kind of behind the scenes vision of what took place at the most important moment in the church's history in the last few centuries, and to have Monsignor Larry Beeson recount those stories is really cool. And the last series of this year that I wanted to talk about was that John Senior series. Again, I was excited to do it. I was really happy with the way it turned out. And then also to have, Bishop Connolly on to end it was incredible. He's just, to go those two, the bishop has a lot to do on his plate, and for him to sit down for a couple episodes, and you could tell the enthusiasm he had, because John Senior just changed his life. It changed his life dramatically, along with so many others, which is why we wanted to do the series, right? John Senior is one of those guys where, again, how has my thinking changed? And I would point to him and his philosophy and the philosophy of the Integrated Humanities program at Kansas and what they preached as a major change in my philosophy and in the way I see the world and what I believe to be the good life. I think they really helped me to solidify or question, I guess, my preconceived notions. And again, that's part of life, right? And I think that's what's been fun for me to, especially today and last week, to go through these 300 episodes and be like, man, I have changed a lot. And that's a good thing, right? I think I'm progressing in the spiritual life. I'm becoming more mature. And hopefully we're all doing that, right? And I do talk about that with some frequency when I'm talking about at the beginning of the year, recapping last year, forecasting next year. Hopefully we are all getting better. Hopefully we're not. I sure hope I'm not the same person at 38 as I was at 28. I sure hope I have a better knowledge of my faith. I hope my marriage is stronger. All those things, right? So I hope that in working hard and keeping an eye on what's important and studying and getting closer to more Catholic guys who are striving to be good fathers, who are striving to be good husbands, that I then in turn become a better father and a better husband. We're going to head to a short break, and we'll be right back.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio comes from Fitness by Design, your neighborhood fitness studio, located in Des Moines, offering PH or fitness classes, private and semi-private training, Beamer, and massage. Learn more at fitnessbydesigndm.com, 515-770-3844.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio comes from Catholic United Financial, a member-owned, not-for-profit financial services company that connects, protects, and generously impacts the families, parishes, and schools in Iowa communities. For over 145 years, Catholic United has helped build stable and secure financial futures for Midwest families. Learn more about how Catholic United Financial can help you and your local parish. Contact Tara Weiss or Peter Orm at 1-800-568-6670 or visit CatholicUnitedFinancial.org.
Support for programming comes from Klein Electric, a local family-oriented electrical contractor, a 100% employee-owned company with branches across the Midwest to provide comprehensive electrical services. Klein Electric is able to help with any residential and commercial project. Learn more at KleinElectric.com.
Attention pro-lifers, help us celebrate life by attending Pulse Life Advocates Pro-Life Christmas Gala. You will enjoy a great combination of Christmas entertainment and a meal, along with our inspiring speakers that will be attending this event. The date is Saturday, November 18th at the Iowa Event Center in downtown Des Moines. You can get more details at pulseforlife.org. pulseforlife.org. We hope to see you this November.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio comes from Caldwell Parish Funeral Home and Crematory. Caldwell Parish offers services that are unique to the individual while following the Catholic funeral rites. Caldwell Parish Funeral Home and Crematory, Des Moines' only Catholic-owned and operated funeral home.
Thank you to our business partner, Matt Moffat, offering fiber new restoration services. Eco-friendly and mobile, Matt can come to your home or business to repair, restore, and renew damaged leather, plastic, vinyl, fabric, and upholstery. Learn more at fibernew.com/Altoona-Des Moines.
My help comes from you.
Welcome back to Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. 300 episodes in the books. Hope I didn't bore you. These last couple episodes, hope you stuck around. Hopefully that, it leads to some, sort of exploration of maybe some of these episodes, some of these good conversations that we've had over the years. You can go back to the Father Zach days, especially if you're new listeners and you haven't had an opportunity to listen to some of those. There's some real gems. And I think about that every time I have an episode. Hopefully you guys can feel that. I'm not trying to, there really is a purpose when I'm doing this. We have a purpose to why we have certain guests on, why I'm hitting certain topics. And usually there's my idea at every episode is why, if I'm a guy listening to this show, what am I going to get out of it? And so the answer to that question today is hopefully it's making you and do a couple things. A, maybe opening your eyes to one of the subjects and diving into one of those series, whether it's the Great Men of the Bible series or the Virtue series or a specific interview on a specific topic, maybe lead you to do that. But then also, as I mentioned multiple times now, 2016 to 2023, I just seen it's interesting for me to be able to watch this and look at these episodes and just see how I've changed, how I've grown, how I've matured over these years. And so hopefully in your own life, you think, okay, where do I need to mature? And I still do this every year for myself, right? I know there are things in my life. I'm not perfect. I'll never be perfect, but I'm going to keep striving to become better. I'm going to continue to strive to round out those rough edges, right? And so when I do that, as I do that, right, I will become the man that I want to be. And that's why, again, this idea of the unexamined life is not worth living. We need to examine our life constantly so that we can refine ourselves and become the man that we're supposed to be. We can become the father that we're supposed to be, which is why this next series that I am doing, and I'm in the middle of recording right now, this heroic fatherhood series. Again, I need to become a better father. I know that. So selfishly, I'm just going to interview a bunch of people who have thoughts on that, right? And get their thoughts on it. And hopefully all of us together will become better fathers. We'll have a better idea of what God the Father wants from us as fathers. So I sure hope this next series is equally edifying as some of the other ones I've done, and more so, right? It's very tailored to this idea of fatherhood, this great call that we have as men to pass on the faith to the next generation, to raise up the next generation. And so again, as I'm continuing to try becoming a better person, we're all doing this together. I think it's a good time to reflect for me, this little break at 300 episode, a good time to reflect on that. And then to look forward. Okay, what do I still need to do? Where do I need to improve in my own life? So thank you for joining me today on Man Up. I am Joe Stopulus. It's time to man up.
Man Up, inspiring men to live out their call to holiness.